sometimes comes in.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the regular City of Prescott Council meetings to order. It's Monday, July 24th. It is 6 o'clock. Roll call. Maureen?
Here.
Pat?
Here.
Dar?
Here.
John?
Here.
Lindsay?
Here.
And Bailey is excused. Would everybody please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is public comments. The council will receive public comments on any issue related to the agenda. Limited discussion by the council may take place. Dallas?
Yep.
Is that on the agenda, Dallas?
I don't know, am I on the agenda?
No.
Afterwards, you'll have the off agenda.
Okay, hearing none, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. City council meetings from July 10th, tourism committee minutes from July 11th, Parks and Public Works minutes from July 17th, and the TIF Joint Board of Review, July 19th.
Motion to approve the consent agenda items 1 through 4.
Second?
We have a motion, a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The next item is report of standing committees and commissions. Nothing for finance. Planning Commission, next meeting is Monday, August 7th at 6 o'clock. Parks and Public Works Committee report. John, do you want to do that, or you just want to skip that since Bailey's not
I was
here?
not at the
Okay.
meeting last week, so.
I can do, it was pretty simple.
Okay. You want to give her a little report?
Sure. We covered it, excuse me. One of the bigger items that we covered was the discussion about signage and/or any additional maybe fencing or safety for the park. And I'm not going to make sure.
Public Square?
Thank you, Public Square Park there. The school district, gentleman from the school district came and presented about it, that because of the new setup with the schools, there'll be a lot more kids at a younger age in that school, and they were looking for additional signage and possibly even some fencing to go along what I'll call the south side of the park, in case kids were to be chasing balls or whatever else along those lines. And we asked them to see if the school district would be able to possibly help with any of that and then bring it back to us rather than just maybe setting it all on the parks or the city. The parks does not have anything in their budget for that, so of course it would have to come from the city. And of course I don't think we had anything planned for it. So that will come back around. Yes, scenic byways grant. So the funding for that is coming back around. Of course, we were not approved for our scenic byways funding from for our trail, but there is an opportunity for it to be resubmitted. We were told that we did very well with our proposal on a few guidelines. They weren't able to give us things that we could say specifically to do this. This thing doesn't always come back available again, but evidently it is going to be open again, and so we're going to be looking to resubmit that, and hopefully, because we did so well, there were no funds issued in the state of Wisconsin on this last round, which was interesting. So that maybe next time, if it does come around to Wisconsin and we did so well, keep our fingers crossed. We're hoping that we can do something along those lines. I think that kind of covered the highlights.
Okay, thank you. So the next meeting for August 21st has been canceled. Are we going to reschedule that, or September?
September.
Okay. Health and safety, the next meeting is Monday, August 14th at 5 o'clock. Personnel, the next meeting is Wednesday, August 2nd at 5 o'clock. Next item on the agenda is public comments. The city will now receive public comments on any issue not related to the agenda item. Then a discussion by the council may take place. However, no action will be taken on any item. This includes receiving a written request or documentation and possible action at a future consideration. Dallas? Tell us who you are and where you live, Dallas. Your audience awaits.
My name is Dallas Eggers. I live at 178 Locust Street South, and I've been around here for about 71 years. I've been to a few council meetings and school board meetings for the last several decades, and I always start by thanking you. You're doing a job nobody wants to do. You take all the garbage, and you never get any thanks. So I don't have to agree with you. That's not important. I thank you. And so I always try and do that. I also start my speeches by crediting people before I even dive into it, because I never get to that. So I'm hopefully make this fairly brief. Ask your questions at the end, and I'll try and hold it within so you don't have to eat or go to the bathroom. I'm dealing with the Steamboat Lot. The first mention of the Steamboat Lot actually comes from the Native Americans. The Native Americans used the rock ledge in front of Prescott and the mouth of the St. Croix as a navigation mark for at least 1,000 years. After them, it was used by the trappers, it was used by the traders, it was used by the steamboatmen, it was used by the flatboaters. They knew at Prescott this is where the rock ledge was. The first mention of Europeans here was Father Hennepin in 1680. Daniel Gracel and Sieur Duluth met him here at the confluence of the St. Croix and Mississippi, right in front of the Steamboat Lot. Mr. Duluth was the first one to come up the Brule and go across between Gordon and Solon Springs and enter the St. Croix from the north. And so that's kind of where the Europeans got here. The fur traders, they had a trading post in town. There was a prominent Native American village here for many, 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 many years, decades, most likely centuries. If you see the mention of a Chief Little Crow, it's a good bet he was born in Prescott. There were several, it was a family name, and even the Little Crow at the Sioux Uprising was from Prescott. So it is a historical spot, to put it mildly. Zebulon Pike came here in 1805. He claimed 1,200 acres in Prescott, 1,200 acres in Hastings. His intent was to save it because he thought that the fort to defend the upper Mississippi was going to go at the confluence of the Mississippi and St. Croix. Thankfully, it didn't. It went to Fort Snelling. The first buildings on the site were the Redmond warehouses. They started in 1666. There was a flour mill built there in 1867, burned down about a year later. The warehouses stayed for several years, and then they were finally torn down, but the wood was reused, and it built the International Order of Odd Fellows Hall, which sat there from 1895 until about 1958. It was an opera house. It was a performance venue. The school district played basketball games there. They put their plays on there. So it was a historic building, torn down in 1958. Close to that was built the St. Croix Theater. Went up in 1937. We had a theater in town. It was run by Jerry Reichert and Iona Hammond for his first 15 or 20 years. And it did quite well until they realized they couldn't battle television. And so it really closed in about, the theater closed in about 59 or 60. Shortly after that, a man named Pat Connolly took it over. He brought the steamboat. And if you'd been in the steamboat, you'd notice the weird floors and the levels. That's because it was a theater that had you walk down into the theater. I actually had an email from a lady whose father built the building in 1937 and that type of thing. So it sits on a famous lot. It sits on a beautiful lot, an unusual lot. And really, we don't know what's going to happen with it. What's the value of that location to our city as a business? Well, we can kind of pin that down in property taxes. What is it in value to our citizens, our guests, and our tourists? Me, being a river rat, a towboat pilot, a lifeguard, a windsurfer, a sailor, the St. Croix River is a remarkable place. And to cut our view of that off right at that point at the end of downtown, I don't think is doing us justice. That's my opinion, though. That's only my opinion. And tonight, I represent nobody. I represent myself and the 27 people who wrote the letter 7 years ago. I simply did the homework on their letter. This is not my idea. Several of those people are in the room tonight who wrote the letter to the council 7 years ago saying, it should be a park. It should be a number of things. Many communities around here have made major investments in their city fronts. St. Paul just put 27 million in. Stillwater just put another 8 million in after spending 9 million not too many years ago to buy up the old Eiffel Towing Company. Bayport bought the riverfront back. Hastings is still in process. Wabasha has a beautiful little lot, kind of just like ours. It sat dead for several years, and now it's a park with a band shell. And so maybe it's time for us to think a little differently. It is called Eyesore Park, and that is a colloquialism that is used by the people in town, and as soon as you mention it, everybody knows exactly what we're talking about. It carries the tone of what we see every single day. It has held a liquor license for over a decade, not really getting much out of that. So I think the time to have a discussion as to what we may possibly do. First of all, we would only ask for 3 or 4 handicap parking spaces because the DOT, the traffic count is now about 8,500 to 10,000 cars a day, increasing. I'm just wondering if you're ever going to be able to turn off the bridge and get into a parking lot there, or you're going to end up with a parking nightmare. So we would only suggest handicap parking. We would also suggest toilets, because we believe on the northeast corner there are inlets for water and sewer from the old steamboat building, so we would not have to open the streets. Picnic tables, park benches, located around the area. I have talked to 20 boaters from Red Wing, from the Treasure Island docks, our docks down here. And every single one of them, they want a boat dock down there. They want more boat docks. But they had some specific suggestions that we don't build a single one like it is now, that we build a boat dock that resembles the old steamboat dock. This goes back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and Bob Struhe, Tom Struhe, and myself, we parked 72 boats in the steamboat lock at one time. And so a different configuration may allow us to make better use of the space. We'd have to go out into the channel a little more, but it's out of the navigational channel. I don't believe that would be a problem, at least not from my towboater's experience. So we got to think about that. Then I said, well, what would you do? They said, just put a card swipe. And I said, what do you mean? It says, in Stillwater, Hudson, Afton, we pay $5 an hour. Every hour we park, $5 an hour. And they said, don't put someone down there to check. Don't pay somebody, because the people who don't pay are a small portion of us, and we'll know who they are and we'll talk to them. So we wouldn't have to pay somebody $15 an hour to be down there. So that's something we should think about. They also predict, the boaters, not me, they would predict that we would make enough money on the boat dock to potentially pay for all the operations of the park after the initial construction. That's quite a statement from them, but possibly. Also, bicycling. I've been bicycling around the Midwest for over 20 years. Have lots of thousands of miles in, got a new e-bike. I'm getting older. My wife had an e-replacement, did 20-some miles today. I have seen the Renaissance in Lanesboro. I have seen the Renaissance in Elroy, Sparta. I have seen the Renaissance in La Crosse. I have seen what bike trails do all over the Midwest, because most of them I have ridden. And we are sitting here with an opportunity. The bike trail that Minnesota has graciously led to our doorstep, they're coming. I sit at the History Center every weekend, and my colleagues who are there can vouch for me. We watch the bicyclists. They come over our bridge. They will not cross the 5 lanes of traffic. The vast majority, 90%, they turn around and leave. And then 2 weeks ago, there's 2 guys, they come in there, these nuts who ride 150 miles in the afternoon. And he was talking to me, and he said, we need a loop to put the bikes down between the bridges. I said, yeah, I agree. And he says, well, your city is sitting at risk. I said, what do you mean? He says, you're dumping those bicycles onto the sidewalk. It's their only option. He says, somebody's going to come out of a business and get blasted by a bicycle on your sidewalk, and the city and the business could potentially be sued. And he's a lawyer, and he says, I would take that case. So I don't know if it's not, but it's probably hearsay on his part, but it's something we should consider because I watch it every weekend. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. But my prediction is with the e-bike revelations and what they do now, that you will see more and more and more bicycles coming to this town. They don't belong on Main Street. They belong with a loop. You put them down between our bridges where we could easily put some bike racks down there and accept them down there, then they can visit our town. And so, being a bicyclist, I really think we are sitting with potential. The Cooley Trails is wonderful, and all the work on that end of town, but we need to really look at downtown. Cannon Falls, I had the mayor, two of his children in my class. I asked him, I said, what's the bike trail do for Cannon Falls? He says, oh, $2-3 million worth extra business a year. That was 4 years ago. Probably more than that now. Probably more than that now. When I first started teaching in Cannon Falls, it was only bringing in $750,000 extra. So now they're over 2. And it says it makes their town thrive. And if you're there on a weekend, you'll see that. You will see that. Another thing that we had mentioned is a band shell. Wabasha has a band shell. Hastings has a band shell. We think it might be an appropriate place, but with the traffic noise on the weekends and this kind of stuff, I really am a bit skeptical how successful that would be because the traffic noise, Casey's shaking her head because she's down there a lot because the traffic noise is horrendous. Although potentially, we talked to a landscaper, he says putting up a 10 or 12 foot plant hedge would eat up about 40 to 50% of the noise, so maybe you could do it with a hedge. But that's something we should talk about. Prescott is the gateway to the Great River Road, voted the most beautiful drive in America. They enter in Prescott. It's not very pretty. It's not very memorable. It needs to be. We are an American byway. Another feather in our hat that starts right here that we are not taking advantage of enough. We're trying, and I have to compliment you people. Most of your stuff on the river, I like it. Keep working at it. I really do. I appreciate it. But what is the state of Wisconsin has put lots of money into advocating and building tourism. We are a tourism site. I've talked to several people from Tourism Wisconsin, and they said there possibly is available funds for a tourism site in Prescott. Can't guarantee you, but there is money in Madison for those types of things if you know where to ask. Also, I am part of an organization called North Woods and Waters of St. Croix. We work with the preservation of the water itself. We work with the preservation of the Heritage District, all 8,890 square miles of it, all 114 zip codes. The people I am with started the battles 9 years ago. There were 5 major steps at the federal level to get the federal designation as a heritage zone. We have 1 step left. That means that Prescott would sit in the heritage zone and we can apply for heritage funds from the federal government. Our state senator, Mr. Johnson, is on board. A representative from up north, Mr. Tiffany, they're on board. They think it's a good idea. And so things are coming. We don't know what. But they're potentially, I've handed Carter a list of potential funding sources. I'm not going to come with crazy ideas without giving you some hints as to where you may go. I don't feel that that's the way it'd be. But I've had 2 lawyers. They've looked up the laws of eminent domain at both the federal and state level. The city of Prescott has the right to go in, take the lots, pay the assessed value, and say, thank you, we'll see you later. That is the federal law. That is the state law in Wisconsin. We do not have to pay the asking price, but that's only, I didn't pay the lawyers, so that's only the recommendation. So basically, the discussion is, what are we going to do with it? We need to start it now, and we're hoping this goes somewhere. And if it doesn't, we at least got the discussion started. So, thank you. Questions?
I'm sure we'll have some in the future.
And Rob, I gave Carter a copy of all my notes and that type of thing
Okay.
too, so if you want to see that. And you can call me anytime.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dallas.
Thank you, Dallas.
Thank you.
Okay, any other public comments? Okay, hearing none. The next item on the agenda is approval of the communications plan for the proposal to implement downtown paid parking. Carter?
Yeah.
getting into the start right away. The map, the only changes to this map we made is we added the pay station locations. We added 10 locations. We only have 9 in the direct downtown, but we do have one on the boat launch. We don't know if we're going to go away with that current machinery right there, but it is an option. Our software systems would integrate with that machine, and we could also just replace it with a multi-space pay station as well. We could do both options, and we haven't really leaned either way yet. We kind of just thought of that last week. So we have 10 pay station locations that we conferred with IPS on. All these locations they agree with are good placements for pay stations throughout the downtown. Touching on the parking plan itself, I won't go into the purpose, payments, and permits. Those haven't changed very much since we last met. The enforcement is where we left off. We were still kind of unwrapping that. We did find out that what we're proposing will fully integrate with our current procedures. So that process would be as follows. An officer would scan a violator's license plate with the LPR system. That officer would then be able to write a citation using the IPS citation management software. And that citation information would immediately get pushed into the municipal court software, which is TIPS. It actually cuts out a step for Rochelle, where she would regularly have to manually enter the information. It would just automatically upload as soon as the citation is written, so a bit of a plus there. Into the communications plans now and the contents. We'll have a social media post and a web page for parking information. We'll have public informational meetings, one on August 22nd at 2 times, 11 and 3:30 p.m. For the business informational meeting, and then the council meeting for the full public hearing. We'll also send a letter within the September newsletter. That is this letter. And so this letter is essentially a cover letter on paid parking. It details why we're investigating paid parking and the benefits and improvements that people can see with the paid parking solution. We'll throw in a fact sheet as well. This goes into the details and the specifics of the solution itself, so information on the payments, the permits, and enforcement. Also some other information there to illustrate why we're looking at this solution as a whole. The business info sheet is what we'll mainly be covering at the business informational meeting. This is essentially a combination of that narrative cover letter and the fact sheet, but it's all information that would be important for businesses to hear. So information sheet specifically for businesses for that meeting. And then we have our social media graphic. We'll be posting this on our social media accounts. Little information right on the graphic. So for the people who don't like to go to the full information, they can see it right on the graphic there with the main bits. This is the big thing we retooled. We were looking at the IPS ROI calculator, that big spreadsheet with all those prices and numbers, and we were asking what is the lowest price we could get that annual resident permit to. We came out to $10 a year, and $10 a year is essentially typical admin fee for just processing the permit. The city would only lose $10,000 over 5 years, so it's a pretty minimal loss for what we thought was a great benefit to the residents for $10 a year, just trying to reduce that burden of the cost as much as we can. And this is what we'll be looking at going forward. We have the what is tonight, approving the communication plan. Into next week, we'd be looking at posting the website and our social media account, that graphic. And then August 7th, Plan Commission would offer their recommendation on the parking plan. And then we'd have our 2 informational meetings on August 22nd and 28th. And then into September, be looking at potentially approving the expenses and implementation of the plan. End of September, sending out those physical materials in the mail to residents. And then late fall, early winter, potentially implementing the equipment and system itself. But tonight is just reviewing the communication plan. Can answer any questions, otherwise I'll hand it off to the council for discussion.
When did we talk about visitor day permit parking?
That is something that IPS just recommended. I think $10 a day was, what was that? Almost a little less than 10 hours of parking. So, you know, people, if they don't want to have to continue their, you know, extension of parking or have to go to the pay station, all they can go online, get that day permit, and then they'd be good for the day, not have to worry about it. That's something IPS recommended, so we threw that in there.
And that translates, you said, to about 10 hours.
Yeah, at $1.25 an hour, so, yeah, it's essentially the same.
I mean, and I mean, when we were talking about how much an hourly rate we want to go, my feedback that I've had from a few residents is like, it was very little. Like, if we're going to do it, you should charge more than $1, whatever we were saying, $1.25. So to me as well, it's, if you're doing a visitor day parking at $10, what's the point of having, you know, I mean, everybody can do it then downtown, and then we're still dealing with issues with parking.
Yeah, and that's something we
mean,
can look at if
right.
we're not set on the proposed rate. That is just what was recommended to
Okay,
us by
and I don't want to
IPS.
get off track with that too, and I
That's fine,
know
yeah.
there's more discussions
Well-
later, so.
And I'll somewhat agree with you on that point, that in my thought and talking to folks and thinking about the restaurant idea of it, is that the idea, some of this is that a restaurant wants to see parking turnover. People come in, they sit down, they eat, and they're somewhat motivated to go, but hopefully you give them enough time that they can afford to stay and do some reasonable thing, but they're not gonna camp all day and tie up spots that restaurants can't turn over. And a $10 all-day permit kind of goes the other way of that and allows for somebody to go, yeah, for $10, that's, you know, with the idea that I'm gonna pay 5 or 7, it's only gonna cost me 2 more to get the whole day. I'll just take the whole day. And then you're not turning them over for restaurants, which in my opinion, and from some of the folks who've communicated to me, that's what they hopefully would like to see a little bit more of, is that turnover, with the idea that if somebody does leave, somebody else can come in and then come to another restaurant or whatever and sit down. And quite frankly, we don't know where they're gonna go. They may go to a bar and stand there for 10 hours or whatever.
Sure.
But, yeah, that seems a little bit low for an all-day free ride. I mean, it's not a free ride, but an all-day pass.
Yeah, and that's something, one that we can change. That's just one that we haven't set in stone yet at
Sure.
all.
Sure.
Well, and all the permits are gonna be purchased through that website, right?
Correct,
So
yeah.
they're not
So
gonna
they
be
could be
like
variable as
pre-approved
well,
or
yeah.
anything. No one's going to have any oversight.
We
over
probably
it.
would want them to be pre-approved.
So then we could have stipulations for what a visitor day parking permit looks like.
Yeah, correct.
Good point.
So Carter, just to clarify, the visitor day permit is not something you could purchase through the kiosk.
No, that would be just through the permit portal, typical to all the
That's
other
separate
ones.
from the actual mobile app.
Yeah, it would be accessed, yeah, I mean, you could access it through your phone, through.
But it's not through that same mobile app that where you
No,
can pay for parking.
no, the mobile app would just be paying for an hourly rate by
Okay.
itself.
Just thinking this through, I can't see too many people that are gonna go on the.
I didn't understand it the way
On the
you just
portal.
That are
pointed
gonna
it
go
out.
on
Yeah.
this separate website to purchase a day permit, a visitor day permit. I can't see too many instances where people are gonna go through.
I know what I'll do.
Go to the trouble,
Yeah.
go to the trouble
Yeah.
to save a couple dollars. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
they show up at noon and they wanna stay till 8 PM, well, what is that? $12? You know what I mean? They're not gonna go on some separate website to buy a $10
Correct.
visitor permit. So anyway, I guess I would say just, I mean, maybe just scrap the whole thing and the visitor day permit piece of it. But
At one time, we were going to test this out. Are we still planning on a place, or are we going with full implementation before we test it out?
We thought about testing out, it's kind of how the whole conversation started in that Merkard Mill parking lot. But then if you just have this one centralized place that you're testing out, what's going to stop people from just parking in the next closest spot that's outside of that testing area? And I don't know what kind of data we could get from that, or what, you know, good
Do we want to look
information we
at the
could get.
beach as being a test site? Because, I mean, I feel like residents in town that go there don't have the ability to park at times because there aren't
Right.
parking spots available.
I don't
Hi,
think-
Lisa, I didn't see you sitting there.
I don't, and just an opinion, because, and my family was down there today, for what we're charging and for what they're charging across the river or the bridge. And we own a season pass for across the bridge also, because sometimes they like to mix it up and do two different things with the kids. That, for what we're charging, I don't think you're going to lessen the number of out-of-towners that park there. I think it's such a lovely little spot that folks will willingly pay.
Correct, and it would be I guess now we need to look at, what we're charging and then also using this test site, that's two different things, but I feel like that the beach might be a good place to
Maybe?
test it, I don't know.
If we're gonna implement it in November, December, that wouldn't be a good test.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
That would,
We
Just
sell-
just an observation.
We could sell an ice fishing license with it too, that would work, but
Yeah.
Even Merckard Mill Park, if we're gonna implement it in the winter, it doesn't get near as much traffic down there. So,
yeah.
so,
Well, we can always adjust it once it's implemented, and the big decision is whether to implement it, right?
do we wait until, springtime comes around and then try it at Merckard Mill Park, when there's actually people that are gonna park there because of the marina and because of the, nicer weather? I don't know, I'm just throwing that out.
Well, we have already discussed this piece of it at length, the
Yeah.
potential for this pilot with a certain parking lot, and we, like, as Carter mentioned, we kind of all agreed at one point that it's not gonna give us great feedback. It's not
I
gonna
think
give us
you're right.
very good
I agree.
data to test one parking
Yep.
lot downtown.
Yep. Unfortunately, it's all in or,
Connected.
Any other questions? Discussion? I need a motion.
Well, I will make a motion to move forward with the proposal to implement the downtown paid parking
No, it's-
Communication.
It's the communication plan.
communication plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the communications plan for the proposed implement downtown paid parking. Is there any discussion on the motion?
I think it was really well done, that's it.
Good job on this, Carter, as far
Yeah.
as the presentation and the details, and
Thanks.
it'll be helpful
The
when we're
news-
bringing this
I agree,
forward.
the newsletter looks really good, the newsletter that insert and the business insert both look really good.
Thanks.
And just one follow-up question, Carter. This slide where you have the review of the permit types, is that information gonna go out in the communications plan or not?
Just the annual resident and monthly business one.
And that will have the cost?
Yeah, the
Of
cost will be
$10.
included in there, yeah.
So I guess I would just bring this up right now. We had mentioned we previously mentioned $50 a year, $40 a year.
Correct, yeah.
If we're gonna go down to $10 a year for annual resident, what stops us from just saying residents park free?
Well, that covered the permit processing.
Yeah, it was
part
kind
it,
of
right?
an offset to the cost of the permit software.
Yeah, I recall the reasoning behind it, and it's not, I'm not opposed to that.
Yeah, it also does put a little bit on the other end of the line for, we could always restrict how many permits someone registers for, but if they're free, there's a little bit more room for exploitation of people just registering any vehicle. So if you put a little bit on the other end of the line, it does kind of put a restriction on how many vehicles you can register.
and it makes somebody register.
Correct, yeah.
Well, I guess my thought would be that even having a free permit you would still have to, as a resident, register your vehicle.
Correct, yeah, you'd have to register it, and we would be able to approve or deny that. It would still come through the same process. There would just be no monetary thing on it, so.
I just know that the biggest pushback that we're gonna see on this is from residents saying, why should we have to pay for parking at all?
I agree with that. I don't think they should have to pay. I mean, that's my personal opinion. But I don't think we're charging enough for downtown parking, and that's what we can look
So
at.
your thought is that it should be more expensive for a visitor?
Absolutely.
And free for a resident?
Absolutely. That's my genuine feeling.
We can hold off on making this decision about what parking would cost until
Correct.
after we get
Yeah.
feedback from the other two
Yeah,
groups,
so,
Obviously $10 a year is a pretty minimal
Yeah.
Right.
fee for a parking permit. I mean,
I agree.
But some people are very adamant. They don't think
it's
they
the
should pay
principle,
anything.
people
Yeah.
will be opposed to it just on principle.
yeah, and so the materials, I'd have to double check what we're planning to put on the website. But the physical materials that mention permit prices wouldn't go out till the September newsletter, so there would be opportunity to change that yet if we're looking to.
I think I'm under the idea that we throw this up and stick it on the wall and see what happens.
Have discussions. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not finalizing the cost right now, I guess.
Yeah, this would
Or
just
anything.
be
I mean,
the
this is just moving
communication plan.
forward with
Maybe,
inputs.
maybe my suggestion, and feel free to weigh in on this, would be on this communications plan, for the cost of an annual resident permit, you say TBD.
Okay.
But I'd like to get some feedback on $10 a year, right?
Yeah.
That
No, that's
seems
fair,
pretty-
yeah.
Yeah, so you can put that in there somehow, like $10 or to be.
Subject to
Yeah,
change.
yeah, subject to change, yeah.
I guess we're looking for feedback anyway
Yeah.
from this
Yeah, we are.
communication.
Let's
so-
just leave it at $10 clean and then see what happens.
Right?
We're in a motion right now. So, any other discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carried. Okay, the next item on the agenda is approving the safety fence at Public Square for $6,187 to be shared with the Prescott School District.
Yeah,
Now, if I'm
so,
not mistaken, that's gonna be on Kinnikinnick Street.
yeah,
Is that correct?
parallel
Not
on
on,
Kinnikinnick Street.
parallel,
Yep.
the whole length of the park?
Pretty much, yeah. So, Councilmember Knox touched on it a little earlier, but the school is deciding to move their 4th and 5th graders down to Elm Street next to Public Square Park. So, painting of the crosswalks, adding signage, that's all things city can handle internally. Adding the fence, we had the quote from Midwest for $6,187, and then you have a map in your packet as well. There's a couple playgrounds on that side that kind of are spread out. So the idea is the fence would kind of stop, like if someone kicks a ball and is running towards it from going in the road. So, I mean, we talked about starting a fence near one playground, stopping it, and then continuing it. It just made more sense to really do the entire stretch and cover that whole side. So the quote is for a 5-foot-high black vinyl chain link fence on that side. And I think the idea would be we would go a 50-50 cost share with the school on that.
Is that confirmed?
I believe that's what we talked with the principal there,
Superintendent.
superintendent.
Rick Spacuzza confirmed that they were willing to pay 50%
Okay.
last week.
Thank you.
I'm looking for a motion.
Motion to approve the safety fence at Public Square Park for a total of $6,187 to be shared with the Prescott School District.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the safety fence at Public Square for $6,187 to be shared with the Prescott School District. Is there any discussion on the motion?
I have just a
Go ahead.
couple comments I received that some people were a little annoyed that the city is okay, first off, let's back up. The safety of the children is of the utmost. So the fence probably needs to be done. That's said. But there hasn't been a fence there for a long time. Now we do have kids there. Yes, I get it, or people get it, but putting it on the city when maybe this should have been built into the school district's plan originally, and the way this was kind of sold was that, well, we're gonna have kids there and you have a city park there that we're gonna be using, and so we'd like you to pay for half of that. That part was brought to me, and it was kind of like a, they want us to pay for half the fence. It's only $3,000, but $3,000 is $3,000. Just that discussion.
Any other discussion? Not all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Right, motion carried. There's no closed session, other business. We forgot it,
No, it's actually on the agenda here,
oh, okay.
so that's why I didn't bring it up
Okay.
earlier. Our fire association is looking to have an intergovernmental meeting, and there's the 2 dates listed, August 16th or the 23rd. It would be at 7 o'clock. I'm just looking to see if either of those dates work better for our council members to attend.
I'm good with either one.
I am too.
I can't do the 23rd.
Exactly, and I'm the same.
Okay.
And I'm the opposite.
I think they actually preferred the 16th, just to get it done a little earlier.
Kind of sounds like the 16th.
You think they preferred the 16th?
Yeah, I'm a
Okay.
fire association, so. If that
You
works.
can't
Bring that
do
back
the
to 'em.
16th.
I'm out of town.
John can't do the 16th,
Yeah.
right? And we don't know about
Bailey.
Bailey, but.
Do we have to have a quorum there?
No,
No,
Okay.
but it's nice to have.
it's nice
Yeah,
to tell them
it's
who's
it's
coming.
nice to have everybody there.
Any,
Do you want to try for a different date? Or are we settled on the 16th?
sounds like everybody with John can handle the
Yeah, so I
16th.
think we'll go the 16th, yeah.
Okay.
Any other business?
Can I ask questions if they're about an earlier agenda item?
We normally don't do that since we're already past that. If the council wants to allow that, we'll be all right
We
with
can
that.
allow it. I know you've really clearly stated at the beginning of the meeting, public comments, the city council will hear anything on the agenda. So, I mean, but I have no problem if you wanna, I
I-
think, are there other questions out there? What I was kinda seeing that are on the agenda?
Okay, my problem would be, why didn't we bring them up during that?
I agree.
Okay? Normally, we don't go outside of it, but
I agree.
if you guys want to do that and go to it, okay, but we don't want to be making a habit of that.
Right, my thought would be that today with as many folks as in attendance, when many days we don't have anybody in attendance, I'd like to give these folks the opportunity to.
Yeah,
That's
I
fine.
agree.
That would be my thought for
That's fine.
today.
Yeah.
I'm
I
just telling
agree
you.
with Tom.
Yeah, no, and I get what you're saying. You set a precedent.
Okay.
Tell us who you are and where you live and what you want to talk about.
Melissa Rice, I live at 161 Monroe Street, south of Prescott. And I wanted to talk about the parking. And I didn't, I waited till after that was presented because I wanted to see what was in it. I couldn't find any information about that online. I couldn't see that online. So I didn't know if my questions were going to be answered in the presentation or not, but they weren't. So that's why I still have the questions, and I couldn't ask them beforehand because I didn't know if they were going to be answered. I would have felt silly.
Don't feel silly.
Well, had
Well,
I
write
asked
them
questions
down,
that were
If we
answered.
can't answer them now,
Yeah.
we'll make sure they're answered when we get together in the future.
Okay, so parking meters, were they requested by the Chamber of Commerce?
No.
Did any group approach the city and say, we'd like parking meters?
We're not putting in parking meters.
Well, but paid parking.
Paid
It's
parking?
parking.
But, so
It's
was
not
it
meters, you're gonna go to a kiosk.
kiosk, yeah, just like they have downtown in the
Yes.
city? So no groups approached you and said, we want this, we're having
No.
problems? Did any businesses approach you and say, we want this?
No.
Okay.
We have constant input, negative input most of the time from residents that there's difficulty parking downtown.
They can't get to a
They can't
restaurant.
get to
in
a
the
restaurant, or they can't,
evening, on the weekends particularly.
yeah.
And
So I eat downtown all the time, have never had a problem myself,
Oh.
but I'm willing to
Okay,
walk a
minimal
half a block.
discussion, guys.
Okay, all right.
So, you know, I can walk a little ways, maybe those people can't, I don't know. So there is only one feedback moment, point of feedback that I could see on the communications review plan. It was August 28th. Is that the only moment for residents to give feedback?
August 22nd, two-ton.
You can,
There's a business one, and then there's only
Business
one
meeting.
for residents? There's only one
And then
spot
a
for
public
residents?
hearing on the 28th.
Okay, so that's the one time.
that's
There
the
won't be any
public-
polls or anything done of,
Are the other
Okay.
ones informational? Yeah, so there are 2 informational meetings, and I think you could come to those, right?
Yeah.
Carter?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
Residents
there,
could
on
come?
August 22nd, it's the business informational meeting. It's not, only for businesses. Anyone can come to that. We're not stopping anyone from coming to that. And then there's another one on August 28th for the full public hearing with council.
And there's 2 on the 22nd at 11
Correct,
a.m.
they're two
and
different
3:30.
times.
Yeah.
and those are oriented toward businesses, but
Correct.
residents have an opportunity on the 28th.
Correct.
That's their
Absolutely,
one
yes.
opportunity to have it, okay. It will be the same deal here, where they'll stand up and microphones, okay.
Absolutely.
And has Prescott had parking meters in the past? Is Dallas still here?
Not that I can ever recall.
Okay. I do have a big list of people who've pulled, of cities that have pulled their parking meters. Rhinelander, Wisconsin, Coronado, California, Welch, West Virginia, Henley Beach, Australia. There's many, you can just Google removal of parking meters, removal of parking systems.
Sure.
There are quite a few people who advise towns against it. There was a city planner who said any community that is looking at enforcing time limits should do a thorough analysis of the cost and benefits. I would not be surprised if most find that the costs far outweigh the benefits. So, I just would also like to point out, you probably already know, Hastings, River Falls don't have parking meters. So people who are uncomfortable with the downloading of an app, elderly people, et cetera, will just not come here, I think.
There's also going to, I believe, we were looking at the kiosks, so it was easier for people who didn't have the ability to have an app, be able to pay through a kiosk.
Correct, yeah.
Downtown.
Traditional forms of payment like card and coin.
In addition to. in
Yeah, the
addition
app
to
would
an app.
supplement that as well.
Okay,
This will be multiple options, yeah.
okay. Well, I've done, it's just a little bit of research if people want to read this. I can hand it to somebody.
You can definitely, yeah, and
Thank you.
thank you very much.
If you want to email it to Carter, that would be great as well, if you have it
Okay.
on
Thanks.
digitally.
Tom?
My name is Tom Moss. I live on 154 Locust Street. And what I'm concerned about mostly is unintended consequences. That is, you mentioned employees having to pay a fee for a year permit, I believe,
Monthly, it was monthly.
monthly.
Correct.
I would submit to you that many of them are going to be driven into the hillside community where they don't have to pay anything. And many of the parkers will drive up into our hillside community and park where guests that come to my home would normally park. And I think it's going to be a big result. We're going to be taking 1/2 of the parking off of Locust Street, 1/2 of the parking off of Elm Street eventually, possibly. It's going to really
adversely affect our lives in the hillside community. That's all I have to say about it.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Anybody?
All right. A motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second that motion.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.